Welcome to Conversations. My name is Suresh Kocharlu. Today, we look at what the Supreme Court said in finality about the NEET undergraduate exam, which it had refused to scrap on July the 23rd in an order that was given on July the 23rd. The Supreme Court actually has widened now the entire issue and given reasons for why they refused to stay the exam, re-exam. The Supreme Court actually has remitted the entire exam safeguards, and the detailed judgment held that the NEET undergraduate exam was not compromised, and the leak was limited to certain places, and that places too, the candidates never got an advantage of getting a higher mark. Those arguments were heard in the court the other day. But on Friday, the Supreme Court brought closure to the controversy over the NEET undergraduate exam, that holding that there was no systemic failure in this year's exam. And that is the most important thing, because this exam for the admission to the medical colleges across the country, which is the NEET, was having no systemic failure. That's what the Supreme Court held. The court also actually held that the paper leak was limited to certain centers, for example in Hazaribagh and Patna. And that itself is a very important thing, because the CBI case is still going on, a lot of arrests are being made. And the court had made it very clear that any student who actually had come into the ranks because of this cheating would be kind of debarred and cannot write exam for the rest of their life. But those investigations are still ongoing, and we will know only at the end of the counseling how the things are panned out. The petitioners had tried their best to present a case that the leak, even if it's minuscule, had upset the sanctity of the exam, the integrity of the exam. But the court said no, it had not upset the integrity of the exam, and the results could still go ahead. But the court expanded the scope of the union government set appointed expert panel headed by ex-ISRO chairman K. Radhakrishnan. The government had given certain scope to them, but the Supreme Court has said go beyond it now to ensure that it recommends measures for security, sanctity and integrity of this pan-India examinations. And that's very important, because going forward, next year's NEET exam needs to have no such controversies. The Supreme Court also asked the report to be submitted by September 30, which means they are given an extension now. The court criticized the National Testing Agency for its laxity and flip-flops that we have seen happening this year and maybe even the earlier years too. NTA needs to pull up its socks, get its act in order. That's my take. Pronouncing the 63-page judgment detailing reasons for its refusal on July 23rd to cancel the NEET undergraduate exam, the Supreme Court bench headed by Justice D.Y. Chandrachud and Justice J.B. Pardiwala and Justice Manoj Mishra held that by identifying and rectifying vulnerabilities, such a committee, that is a committee headed by K. Radhakrishnan, will help restore the trust in the examination system, and the government should implement robust safeguards to prevent future malpractice. This is extremely important, because an exam of this nature, where 23 or 24 lakh students take it in every year to get about 1 lakh seats, it's kind of 1:23. So naturally, there's a lot of pressure to cheat the system. The Supreme Court faulted the NTA for failing to communicate the time to the designated banks for the release of one particular set of question papers, resulting in the candidates getting wrong question papers. Now, let me explain to you what actually happened in this case, because it is very important to understand why banks were used to keep the question papers safe. The banks usually keep question papers of various examinations which are in their lockers, and we see that from the state to the graduate level and even in many other competitive exams. But in this case, what happened was that there were two sets of question papers. One was given to the State Bank of India, another was given to the Canara Bank. So they were called State Bank of India papers and Canara Bank papers. Across the country, in all the centers where the exams were being held, the main branch kept all the papers with them in lockers. So State Bank kept the State Bank set of papers, the Canara Bank kept another set of papers. On that day morning, the day of the exam, at 5 a.m., the city center head of that particular area gets a message from the NTA saying this set of papers need to be taken and given to the candidates. So in many cases it went right, saying that this time it is the State Bank of India papers that have to be taken. But there was some miscommunication, and some centers, the center heads went and collected papers from both the banks. Now it's a mystery, why did Canara Bank give the papers when they were not authorized to give it? Only State Bank was asked to give it. Obviously there's some systemic failure in that. And surely that Radhakrishnan committee will look into that and have a robust system where it ensures that this kind of messaging goes correctly and goes well. Now, a body like NTA, for example, which is entrusted with immense responsibility in relation to this highly competitive exam, cannot afford the misstep. Take an incorrect decision and later kind of play around with verbs and words. They cannot do it. So the communication about the release of the question paper has to be absolutely clear next time around. All decisions of NTA must be well considered with due regard to the importance of the decision being made. Flip-flops, because we saw various flip-flops happening in this time's NEET exam. One was extra marks because the candidates got the wrong question paper. Another was 2 answers to the same question, all this kind of stuff. Though the bench spared the students from having to write the exam, that is about 23 lakh students from write the exam again, the NEET undergraduate exam, as demanded by the petitioners, it faulted the NTA for failing to communicate in time to the designated bank for the release of the correct set of question papers. This is what I told you in detail about how that process happens. So next time, don't get it wrong, get it right. It's a very simple thing saying that this bank's, the question paper sitting in this bank had to be collected and not anything else. Now obviously the question would be, what happens when the exams are held outside the country? Now there should be some system for that too. And that of course NTA will come up after the Radhakrishnan committee submits its recommendation. The court also held the NTA responsible for awarding full marks for 2 options, which I said, which was an atomic theory question actually. And the court, Supreme Court asked IIT Delhi, who a professor from there, to come up with the correct answer. He said there's only one answer because there was one old NCRT answer, one new NCRT answer. But the IIT Delhi professor held, no, there is, as per this question, there's only one answer and that is the answer. So there cannot be 2 answers for the same question. So a lot of candidates came down the ranks. Some candidates went up the rank, some remained unchanged. And that's what we saw. Further, the most important, it created actually a unique situation where NTA's decision to award a grace marks to candidates, over 60 candidates in this case, scoring perfect 720 on 720. Now that was crazy. So we saw that number of top 720 to 720 coming down because of this grace marks that were given for either the extra time that was given out because the candidates got the wrong question papers, or the one question having 2 answers. Authoring the judgment, Justice Chandrachud said that the Radhakrishnan committee must evaluate and recommend reforms in the mechanism of administration of exams. So this goes beyond NEET now. It goes to all other competitive exams. Rigorous checks and balances have to be done at every stage, from setting question papers to declaring results. Even the printing part of it was questioned by the Supreme Court. So obviously, there has to be some way to do it. Might take it, do it in an online manner. That's the best thing, like what IIT JEE does. It extended the tenure of the court, the court extended the tenure of the commission from August 22nd to 30th, which I told you, and said it must submit its recommendation by that date to the Education Ministry. So basically, they're getting about something like 40 days more, 45 days more now. The court said that the Dharmendra Pradhan headed Education Ministry shall take the decision of the committee's recommendation within a month of receiving the report. Don't sit on it forever. So within a month of the committee submitting its report, that is September 30th, by October 30th, the decision has to be taken and what recommendations, how it's going to be implemented. The court also held that the committee would formulate certain standard operating procedures to set out, for example, the timelines for registration of candidates. There were various confusion. There were time, the window was opened again, some candidates were allowed because some court in Rajasthan said yes, they can do it. Then the change in preferred cities, students from some cities going to another city to write an exam, God knows for what reason, maybe the coaching center is there, that is why they wrote the exam from that seat. Most important, the sealing of OMR sheets. I believe the OMR sheets in some cases for 1.5 hours remained with the main invigilator and was not sealed. No, that has to be done. It has to be sealed immediately after the exam is over. I'm sure the Radhakrishnan committee will find that. And other process relating to the exam, that is the NEET we are talking of. Once adopted by the National Testing Agency, the standard operating procedures must be adhered to maintain the integrity of the exam. Surely this is a lot of things that have been clarified by the court now. So everyone now looks forward to the recommendations of the Radhakrishnan committee, and I'm sure instead of hiding it, the Education Ministry should actually put it on its website on September 30th itself, or even before when it is submitted. This is extremely important so that students going to write the exam in 2025 will be assured that this is going to be a fair one this time. Not that it was not fair last time, but the leakage of question papers will continue because there are people in the systems who will try and take advantage of it. Maybe they'll get more sophisticated now. Even in IIT JEE, there are cases of impersonation. And people who are actually registered for the exam, somebody else takes the exam for them. The best way to do that is to use the iris scan in front of the computer they are sitting in. So constantly the exams, the agency conducting the exam, in case that IIT centers who are doing it, they will know whether the right candidate is sitting in front of the computer and taking the online test. But the NEET exam needs to move from a paper and pen method to a kind of online method. That's the best way to do it. But as I said, let's wait for the Radhakrishnan committee recommendations to come in. And I'm sure there will be so many standard operating procedures that will be set into it, which will be also followed by the other exams that are conducted around the country. Till then, keep watching. Jai Hind.